Hello and welcome to a tutorial on how to make your own custom NPCs in SMBX2 Magalex3 build. This guide will teach you how to make your own NPCs which you can then drag and drop from level to level without a big hassle or even a single line of Lua code once the NPC is written. You'll still need Lua in order to develop the NPC, but hopefully by the end of this you will have a more thorough understanding of how this stuff is put together, and the overall experience will be less daunting to approach. So in the handbook I specify something called the 751 to 1000 range. These are 250 ID slots for effects, blocks, BGOs and NPCs which are completely free for you to use. We will never touch them as the developers. You can do whatever you want with them. One thing that is possible with this range is you can make NPC packs, which you can then send to people, have them drag and drop into their episode, and let them use. In the templates folder in SMBX data templates, you can find various template files which prove to be useful for various specific tasks. The ones we are interested in are npcn.ini and npcn.lua. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy them over to my level folder, and I'm going to rename those so that this one says NPC 751, the first one in the range, and this one says NPC 751 as well. Now that they all have an ID, I want to go in here and just first of all set the ID of the image so that the editor knows where to point. In general, the INI files for blocks, BGOs, NPCs all refer to what the editor can see. So this is all going to be the definition for the editor, while in the Lua file we will specify what the game will do with the NPC itself. But before we can do that, let's figure out what we want to make. So what I've decided I want to make is these little parachuting NPCs over here. So the first thing I would like to do is I'm going to copy the dummy.png file over, which is just like a dummy image for like renaming, and rename that to npc 751.png. Alright, now that this file is here, I need to make a sprite sheet for the NPC. If you have made custom NPCs before, you should be familiar with this process in a way. We basically are going to take these 4 sprites for the Goomba, and we're gonna paste them onto the sheet so that they make sense and are uniformly distributed. So first thing I like to do is just figure out how big the canvas needs to be. I do this by just going back to a standard resolution, giving myself a little background color, which is like fairly unused by the sheet we're going to use. And then I'm going to take these over, and what I'm interested in when copying these is how wide and tall all of these are going to be in total. So this one is like down here 23 pixels wide and 30 pixels tall, but you can see that this one is a little bit taller. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over and see that this one is actually 31 pixels in height. So this is 31 in height, 23 in width. However, what we might want is for the parachute to be centered. So the easiest way to figure out how the centering should work is if we mirror this so that the image is the same width but in the other direction, and we overlay them in a way where if we like take this, we see that there is like no movement on the parachute. Now, whether or not you like this one or the other one more is up to your own interpretation. I think I like having them like this more, which means that on the sprite sheet in the end they will be laid out like this, with the green and red areas like filled in as nothing. So now the job is to take these dimensions of in total 32 by 31 pixels and running the entire sheet through that so that they make a fluid animation. So I'll just meet you when I'm done with that. What we have right now is actually half the sprite sheet. What we can do right now very easily is take this, drag it down, and then flip it in order to get the exact reverse animation. And now it's going to be smooth when it goes through the entire thing. Next step is just to take this and get rid of all this excess stuff so that we are left with the transparent image. Now, final step is to resize, and then there we have it. That's the NPC 751.png file, which we will use for our NPC. So now I'm going to go back into the INI file for the editor and go change the name real quick to Parachute Galumba, which is of the group of Super Mario World enemies, and in the category enemies. These categories are just for your own categorization. They are not strictly necessary to have, but I like having them just, you know, because it's good to know. Description. So these values are for the image, the positioning, the offsets, and everything. This is for the offset from the graphics to the hitbox. This is the hitbox, and this is the this is the image, the graphics, and this is the hitbox, and this is an offset on the editor grid. Like, if you place it, how far should it be offset from where you place it? Usually it's good to keep this one very low, but sometimes you place enemies in a really weird way. If you just edit these, and this one, that it might be good to just shift the NPC down like a couple of pixels so that they don't hover awkwardly above the ground. So we have a frame style 0 NPC with, I think, in total 12 frames. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yep. So we have 12 frames. No custom animation. Everything is fine. And we just need to change like the size. Since we had 32 by 31, we need to multiply that by 2 each because we resized to 2. And as you can see, now the dimensions are 64 by 62. So that is GFX height of 62. That's not what I typed. And here 64. And now we need to decide where we want the hitbox to be, because one thing that is kind of awkward is that the Galumba is what we're gonna jump on, but it like shifts awkwardly side to side. Hello, post-production Angel here. What I want to do is actually put it exactly in the middle so that we get a best of both worlds, because the added calculations for making a swaying hitbox is a little bit difficult, and I don't want to bother you with that in this tutorial. This is something for another time. And it works fine enough with it in the middle. However, I'm making the mistake of placing it at the top on the parachute here right now to make it nicer in the editor. This will be resolved shortly though. Yes, we can take a look at it in the editor. So, in order to take a look at it in the editor, we need to, I think, just press F8 and then create a new tileset of NPC Parachute Galumba. There it is. A beautiful one. Custom NPC test. There he is. So, there's our Galumba. You can see the hitbox is just on the parachute because we offset it by 30 pixels. And if we enable animations, it's going to shift around like this. So, now we have this Galumba down here, but you know, it doesn't really do much yet. So you'll notice it just kind of drops and doesn't even look like anything. this is where we need to program our own AI. The NPC 751.lua, which I copied in, aims to make this all a little bit easier. It has a lot of like preset stuff which you can redefine for yourself wherever you need it. So NPC Manager is something we need in order to register stuff that should happen. Like, for example, if we want the NPC to do something every frame, we need to register something to NPC Manager, which will then manage and redistribute it. Sample NPCs are an NPC table, where you can rename this to Parachute Goomba. I know it's a Galoomba, but Goomba is a little bit shorter, and I'm lazy. This one is a constant that has the ID of the file name, which means that if we do this line, we never need to know which ID we actually have. So if we were to like rename all of this to be a 752, it would still work, which is very useful to have. So we're gonna enter the same GFX width and GFX height things in here. So that's for GFX height 62 and for GFX width 64, width and height of 32. We're still gonna use the offset X and offset Y so that it matches whatever is in the editor, which means we need to put 30 here. 12 frames of no frame style and frame speed 8. Maybe 6, but that's something to adjust later. Speed is not really necessary right now, but we can do something cool with this, like different falling speeds if we want to. These variables are not necessary for us. They're more for like block-like NPCs. For example, if you want the player to stand on it, or if you want the player to see it as a wall of sorts. No gravity is useful for us because we want to make our own gravity so that it's slower. So we want to enable that. No block collision is false. We want to still collide with blocks, and we will actually use a block check to see if we collided with the floor and should turn into the other NPC. No fireball. Should we shoot a fireball at it? Will it explode? Sure. Right. Should Yoshi be able to eat it? Sure. Why not? No water physics means that if it hits the water, it just continues doing its own thing. For this one, up to you, but I would like to keep it false. Should we take damage when jumping on it? No. This one is for spinies. If it's true, then we can bounce off spinies with a spin jump. Harmless grab, harmless thrown are when the NPC shouldn't kill stuff when it's thrown. Right. Down here we can define like custom properties just by saying something like fall speed equals 5 by default, and then users can edit this in their NPC TXT files. We will maybe return to this later when we have some code written up. Right, this line just sets these settings as the defaults. So now, even now, if we just reload this, reposition this, now the hitbox is in the middle, and put it back down, see, now it just looks already much better. It just doesn't do much yet, right? So if we scroll further down, there is one more step before we get to the juicy part, which is the register harm type section, which defines what should cause the NPC to take damage. These are all the applicable harm types. So what we can do is uncomment these. This one we don't need. And then there are some effect presets over here, which just map an effect to the harm type, so that when the NPC dies, it also spawns a little effect. I don't remember the Galoomba effect off the top of my head, but I will add it later on. By default, it's just a smoke cloud. So now we have that set up. We can get to the juicy part. On init API is when the LunaLua API has initialized this library, we can register stuff like an onTick event or an onDraw event. And I think for now we just need the onTick event. The onTick end event is what I use because this runs after the vanilla loop, which means that we can do stuff like immediately react to when the NPC hits the ground, which is really handy to have. Now that we have enabled this, what I want to do is change it to onTick end NPC here real quick to just see what the default AI runs through. Oh right, it doesn't fall to the ground. I want to add v.speed y equals 0.26, for example, then it just kind of drifts slowly to the bottom. That's maybe a little bit too slow. Let's go a little bit faster. And then because of what this does, this sets v.speed y to -6 from the previous code. It just shunts the NPC up a little bit again, which is really not what we want right now, but whatever. So now that we have that, this is actually a really good start with the v.speed y line. We want to set the v.speed y to maybe something like 1, and then do something when it collides with the ground. Specifically, we want to transform the NPC to the ID of the Galumba, which I believe to be 165. And then it should already take care of like the main AI part. Huh, cool, I did it. That's a Lua error. I actually should run that again, just so you can see that. This is maybe something you will run across a lot. So what this says is that in this Lua file, NPC 751, which we're editing, in line 143, it's trying to index something which doesn't exist. NPC in this case. This happened because I used the wrong value. This should actually just be v. v colon transform causes the NPC to be transformed into a new NPC. And there it is. If you see an error like that, and the line errored in something you don't have control over, there's a stack trace below which will help you out. While we do have this handy little Goomba which just kind of drops down, this is also something that happens. It doesn't really react to jumps at all. We can enable the harm types for jump and for spin jump. So spin jump will kill it. We should have that active either way. I just forgot to enable that. And what we can do now is also register the event on NPC Harm. On NPC Harm executes as soon as the NPC gets damaged. Function parachute Goomba.on NPC Harm takes the arguments of event object, which is an event which can be cancelled. So you can cancel the death of the NPC this way, which is something we will make use of. V, which is our NPC, I just like calling it V. It's actually the killed NPC, the one that just got stomped or incinerated. The kill reason, which is why the NPC died, and then a culprit, which we won't use here, but which basically can exist and give us information about which player killed the NPC, which is really useful for certain situations. So the thing to keep in mind about on NPC Harm is that it runs when any NPC dies. So what we first want to do is exclude any NPC that isn't ours. So if v.id is not NPC ID, which is the dynamic variable we got at the start, then we're just gonna return and escape from the function, leave it untouched, do nothing. We also want to do nothing if the kill reason is not a jump, because only through a jump... Wait, actually no. It's a jump and harm type NPC, I believe, which is various like NPC influences, like getting an NPC thrown at it. I think that also just detaches the parachute. So if kill reason is harm type NPC or kill reason harm type jump, then or we can invert this, say if it's not harm type NPC and if it's not harm type jump, then we return so that we don't have an if block. Then we can do our own thing, which transforms the NPC again. So now we know we jumped on it or tossed an NPC at it. So what we can say here is just v transform 165, right? Let's take a look. That almost worked. What a beautiful display of a squished Rex. Yes, for some reason, the default death effect is a squished Rex. And we transformed it to this ID, which has the death effect, which has no death effect for the stomp set, so it defaults to the squished Rex. So what we forgot to do is we forgot to cancel the kill, which we just do simply by event object.cancelled is true. And now, let's take a look. That was just a default behavior. It was a little bit quiet. I would have wished there to be a sound effect, which we can very easily add. sfx.play2, for example. And then he just kind of walks around. And that's actually all there is to it. Now, this is all nice. There is a few things I want to mention though. By default, there is no handling for when the NPC is grabbed or thrown or contained in something. Depending on which NPC you make, you want to have different stuff in here. Because you might run into like weird edge cases. For example, if I go in here and do a 751, which is our Goomba, and put that into our reserve box. It just kind of rises, but he rises faster than usually one of those NPCs would in the reserve box. And if I toss this, it just kind of cancels out because it already like applies our speed Y. So for a smoother effect, we can do something like just return. Then none of our code gets applied if we're in a held state or dropping out of the item box. So here he comes, and now I'm gonna toss him up, and that looks much better already. But you saw the Y movement was a little bit snappy there at the end. I want to show something else, which is a generator, a projectile generator going left, for example. How that will behave. This is another weird edge case because we have no code that says how the NPC should react to X speed. We only specify Y speed. So what I would do actually is I want to slow down speed X over time with this NPC so that it just gradually comes to a halt when it's like tossed. What we can do very easily for this is just multiply speed X by a constant that is slower than speed X, so it will gradually get slower and slower. And if v.speed X is smaller, no, if the absolute value of speed X, which gets rid of our negatives, so we can say if it's smaller, -1 will become 1 in method absolute. If it's smaller than 0.1, so if it's marginally small and we cannot really notice a difference anymore, then we want to just v.speed X equals 0, so that we don't deal with infinitely small numbers. It's just a little neatness thing. And one change I want to do to v.speed Y is I want to say that v.speed Y is v.speed Y plus 0.1, which is like a very slow acceleration. However, I want it to never exceed 1. So it's going to pick between the smaller number, between v.speed Y plus 0.1 and 1. So now what we should be facing is actually a much smoother outcome, where the NPC just kind of comes out of the generator and onto the ground. And right here we can actually also just test how it reacts to stuff being thrown at it. Just detaches from the parachute, because that's Harm type NPC. What other thing? Right, that was like the interaction. No, that's not the interaction. I was confusing something. So, I actually confused the Super Mario World bubble with the parachute. Actually, the NPC should just die. But you can see how easy it is to change this. We just take this line out, like this part of that line, and suddenly our parachuting Galumba will just die if it gets something thrown at it. Right. The only change remaining is to add the proper effect. You can see the smoke cloud there, and for that we just can go into the graphics effect folder, take a look where the Galumba effect is, effect 88, and then plug that right in here. We want the 88 effect to be played whenever any of these effects happen, except for spin jump and sword. Spin jump, I forget, I think it's like 70 something. They've been 75 or 76. I think it's 76. And sword is 63. So now we have an NPC which has a functioning AI, throws its effect out, and dies to a sword. Proper effect. And dies to a spin jump. Oh, I'm being assaulted. Alright. Let's test the spin jump, and then that's it. Oh, it actually plays that. Okay, you also saw that with the sword. We actually don't need the spin jump with the sword effect because they're already played. That's handy. You learn something new every day. Oh, there it is. And yeah, very simple NPC, but hopefully it explains the concept of making these NPCs a little bit better to you. I will make a follow-up video to this one, which is probably up by the time you see it, which also implements the Babam and shows you how to make an AI file. More on that later. Thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something today. If you have any questions, please make sure to comment them down below. I will gladly answer them to you. Goodbye.